welcome to another edition of Disability and You. I am Ganesh Singh and I'll be with you for approximately 30 minutes. On this edition, I will be having a discussion with Mr. Kian Chung, and he is the Assistant Chief Education Officer for Special Education Needs at the Ministry of Education. Our focus will be the future of special education needs in Guyana. As we all know, children with disabilities, like every other child, has the right to a meaningful education. Over the years, here in Guyana, we would have encountered many challenges in children with disabilities accessing that basic right. However, the Ministry of Education over the past few years would have been making significant strides in ensuring that Guyana can become more inclusive and provide an education for children with disabilities. Mr. Chung has been at the forefront of these efforts by the Ministry of Education along with his team. So we're going to hear from Mr. Chung on what are the plans at the level of the Ministry of Education for special education needs. Mr. Chung, welcome to the program and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Excellent. We'll get straight to the point. Mr. Chung, we know that there would have been significant challenges. Some of those challenges still exist as it relates to children with disabilities accessing a meaningful education. To get more specific, we know children with developmental disabilities, while they are allowed to be in special education needs schools, there is limited or no scope for their matriculation into any vocational institution, or they do not leave school with any bit of qualification or competency. What are your plans to ensure that this is something of the past?
Thank you for the question. I'd just like to say that there has been scope, limited though it may be, because we've had learners with special education needs and disabilities accessing some of the vocational services that are being offered here. What we intend to do is to build on that and to see how we can have it more accessible by a wider range of persons and more accessible to different categories of disabilities.
Mhm. So, to get more specific, yes, I would agree that there were some children with disabilities who would have access vocational institutions and acquire some level of skills. Um, what are your plans to make this more sustainable and across the board in all the administrative regions?
Well, one of the things we've started is a conversation with the TVET arm of the Ministry of Education. And to date, what we're looking at is looking to see where we have special schools. For now, we're looking at Georgetown, Region 6, Region 10, and seeing what those schools need to have a technical vocational unit within them so that learners can access the services right there at the schools. And then we'll branch it off to others as we see fit.
That's great. And what about expanding special education needs / inclusive education services to the regions where there is little or no system in place to provide children with disabilities with an education, especially the hinterland regions?
Well, the need to support persons in the hinterland region, I think that takes a number of approaches. One would be we now have the Gold Scholarship going on, whereby you have persons being able to access a bachelor's degree in special education. In addition to that, the Cyril Potter College of Education here in Guyana is about to launch its first associate's degree program in special education. So you have teachers there who would be able to, or persons who are desirous of being a teacher, being able to access an associate's degree in special education and being able to further continue that with the Gold Scholarship or even at the University of Guyana. So there's one way in which we're looking to deal with it. And those persons will be branched and placed all across Guyana, and they're from the different regions. They'll be accessing the services. It's also dovetailed with the career pathway for SEND teachers or teachers in SEND spaces, whereby if you're a teacher of a SEND classroom and you've accessed a certain amount of training, you're entitled to certain increments being added to your salary. Another approach would be creating SEND spaces where there's need for them. The regional SEND has been doing a stellar job in terms of identifying, well, not really identifying, but diagnosing disabilities across Guyana. And where we find there's a prevalence, then we see there's a need for a school or a classroom, and we complement that where it is.
Uh, Go
Sorry.
ahead.
No, I was going to add that we currently have a consultancy firm on the ground helping us to put together a non-academic standards or norms for the SENS schools. So we know that SENS schools, be it private or public, should meet these requirements. So as it relates to the Ministry of Education reaching SENS students, those are the approaches that we're looking at the moment.
Mhm. Um, I have two questions, and I'll start with the diagnosis being done by the Regional Special Education Needs Disability Diagnostic and Treatment Center. What are the plans to expand the services at that center to reach the hinterland regions or even provide a service to rural Guyana?
Well, again, it goes back with the identification and where the numbers are. We have and we continue to do outreaches to the region, the hinterland regions, 1, 7, 8, 9. And so, based on where the numbers are, we go to those places, we take the services to them. We're looking to see how best we can equip ourselves, and based on what we found on the ground, till the next time we go, we know what we're taking when we go.
Okay. And in the interim, you mentioned teacher training to ensure that there's an adequate pool of teachers to teach children with disabilities in the outlying regions. We know that will take at least 2 years. What, if any, plans are in place to ensure that in the interim children with disabilities can be able to access some level of education in those regions?
But again, this will continue to happen because we have NSERD. NSERD is the training arm of the Ministry of Education, and I think they're about to launch their continuous professional development program online, and right there is a program in SCN.
So teachers within those regions can be able to access that to acquire at least some level of skills and knowledge to work with children with disabilities.
At this point, I can say there is a course there in special education. Yes.
All right. Let's move on to children who are blind and visually impaired. I know we have a resource unit for the blind and visually impaired in Georgetown. There is one in Linden in the Wisma Hill Primary School,
Correct.
and soon to be established one in Region 6 with NGO Ministry of Education partnership. Are there any plans to have services for children who are blind and visually impaired expanded to other regions?
Absolutely. The Ministry of Education is committed to supporting all learners, blind and visually impaired included. And to that end, we had a meeting with the representatives for the Council of Organization for Persons with Disabilities, particularly based on the Blind Inaugural Conference that was held, looking to see what came out of the conference and what areas what areas we can address coming out of the conference. As it relates to resource units, the Ministry of Education, I believe, would be more than happy to support the initiative, providing we have the numbers and we know where they are and we can provide the support for them, yes.
Excellent. Kian, we know that children with physical disabilities, they cognitively are competent to learn at the same level as children without disabilities, but their major challenge is access to the physical structure and also access to transportation to get to that school. Um, what are some of the plans of the ministry to help solve those issues?
Well, one of the things coming out of the work of the consultancy is helping us to understand how we can retrofit, and as we look towards building new spaces, what would be needed if we're looking for persons, if we're looking to cater for the needs of persons with physical disabilities. So this non-academic standards norms will speak to that. In terms of transportation, we know that that is something that is being worked on. Regions have been making representations for transportation to support these learners, and that is something that will continue to happen.
Mhm. But you mentioned the consultancy working to ensure that the sense spaces are in line with international standards, probably universal design and so on. But we're talking about all schools across the board here in Guyana. So if a child with a physical disability lives in a community, they can go to that community school. Are you pushing within the ministry to ensure that all schools become accessible in line with the Guyana Persons with Disabilities Act 2010 on accessibility?
Absolutely, we can look at it as based on long-term and short-term goals. The long-term goal is to have every school outfitted to support every single learner.
Yeah,
The
of
short-term
course.
goal would to be ensure that in every catchment area there must be a school outfitted to support these learners, so the child continues to be educated within his or her community.
Keon, before we move forward, I want to extend congratulations to you on behalf of not just myself, but the wider disability community on your appointment as the Assistant Chief Education Officer. We know, based on our experience working with you, it's a significant step forward, and you will bring a lot of knowledge, skills, and most of all, passion to this position. And we're looking forward to see a positive transformation in the education system for children with disabilities.
Thank you.
Keon, we discussed children with cognitive or developmental disabilities, children who are blind, children with physical disabilities, children who are deaf. We know that because of the communication barrier, that's a unique group, and they have been placed in these special education needs schools um, for a number of years, and that's the current practice. However, cognitively, once those children are stimulated very early, their learning abilities are on par with children without disabilities. What are your plans to ensure that children who are deaf can be afforded an opportunity for an education in their early years of development? And we can, discuss moving as they grow.
Thank you for the question. As it relates to them in the early years of development, I think it goes back to the whole thing about early identification and intervention. If we find them early, well, then we can put the necessary measures in place to support them. Um, the thing with deafness, from what I understand and from my own personal experiences, is that deafness has a culture of its own. And in some cases, deaf people don't like to say that they have a disability because they have a language of their own and a culture of their own. So they get along just fine. If I may even go further to add, like I was totally pleased and surprised at the amount of teachers or persons who are desirous of coming or being part of the SEN program at CPC who are deaf. So we have young persons who are deaf who want to be part of the teaching profession. And that's just awesome. It just shows that Guyana has been doing something right. The deaf community has been doing something right. They've been supporting their fellow colleagues, and to the point whereby they've gained enough requirements to gain access into the Sierra Porter College of Education, and they're even desirous of furthering themselves in terms of being part of the associate degree program that the college is about to offer.
Mhm. I know, and I do agree with you there, Keon, with the significant stride that the community of persons who are deaf and the country as a whole would have made in relation to persons who are deaf accessing educational opportunities at a tertiary level. We know that within the Caribbean, we were way behind in tertiary level education for persons who are deaf. So, all those who are involved in this process, they should, take a bow, because within the Caribbean, we're probably the second or third country that is affording this opportunity to persons who are deaf. Keon, you mentioned working with the Council for Technical Vocational Education training within the Ministry of Education to ensure that the technical institutes that fall under the ministry, um, they are accessible and the programs cater for the needs of children with disabilities. Are there any plans to incorporate um, vocational skills training within the special education needs schools so that children, probably once they reach attain the age of adolescence, they can be exposed to these skills to see if that's the direction they would like to go?
Absolutely. I think I alluded to
Mm.
it earlier in the conversation when I said we're working with the TIVET arm of the Ministry of Education. We're going to be going to these schools, a collaboration between the special education needs sector and the TIVET sector, to region Georgetown 6 and 10 and see this where we have special schools. The purpose is to see if we wanted to engage our learners at these special schools in these locations with a technical and vocational skill, what would we need to outfit or retrofit these spaces with. And so once that needs analysis or needs assessment has been done, then we can say, okay, what are the immediate things that we need to put inside of this space so that The learners in these spaces can access the facility and by extension accessing the vocational skills that they can access for their based on their ability.
Mhm. Thank you very much for that, Kian. We talk about the skills, we talk about the academics, and what are the plans in those areas. We know many children with disabilities, um, they find it very challenging navigating the period of adolescence, or even if they acquire disability, to deal with that transition. Um, do you have any plans to provide guidance counseling or even rehabilitation counseling to these children and help guide them on a path to have a successful career once they leave school?
Yes, it is something we're looking at because we understand that this is something new, having the scope for reaching a technical vocational level, and we know that persons are going to be even the typically developing peers. I mean, I'm sure we've got some teenagers and adolescents out there. You ask them, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" and they'll tell you they don't know. So the same may be applicable for persons with disabilities. So providing them with that kind of support is something we're looking into. Yes.
Excellent. And what about parents? We know parents play a significant role in the development of their children in all areas, including education. Are there any plans to ensure that parents can be provided with the necessary support, whether it's facilitating the establishment of parent support groups or providing um, general individual support to those parents in helping them to deal with the situation of having a child with a disability?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. When they come to the center for the assessment process, the education diagnosis there, you engage in an interview, and then the interview is followed by the assessment, and the assessment is followed by the report. In the delivering of that report, the psychologist is keen to do a session with the parent before giving the parent this kind of information.
Mhm.
And based on how the parent receives the information, then the parent or the psychologist will determine whether they need to come for other sessions thereafter.
Mhm.
Subsequent to that, we have the individual education planning session, and this is where we identify the goals for the individual. If the individual is at the age of 14 or older, well, then we talk about the transition service, which is basically a post secondary or pre vocational avenue, so to speak. And so both the individual and the parent would be part of this process. So you'd have an individual who is blind or deaf or mild intellectual impairment or having a learning disability being part of the conversation as to what it is he or she wants to be. And the transitions officer would be the one to guide them on that path. You know, these are your strengths, these are your weaknesses, these are the options that you have. And the individual, along with the parent, they would have that discussion there as to what may be the best avenue based on what is presented for them.
Excellent. But long term and a more sustainable approach in relation to these support groups, are there any plans at your end to have those established or promote the establishment of them?
We'll definitely be promoting the establishment of them. I think, for me personally, I think the continuity of these support groups rests with the parents. They need
Definitely.
to see that they're part and parcel of this process, and they need to understand that they're empowering these individuals and the lives of these individuals, because at some point in time they are going to have to stand on their own. So for me, the parents need to come together and say, hey, I need to be part of this. I have something to contribute. I need to learn, and put aside their vulnerability or recognize their vulnerability as they stand in these networks.
Excellent. Keon, before we put a wrap on the program, is there anything finally you'd like to share with the general public, especially um, parents of children with disabilities?
I would just like to say that you should continue to support your child. Just to continue to support your child. Thank you.
Excellent. Keon, I want to thank you very much for sharing with the general public, and we do look forward to having you on the program in the not too distant future to share the ministry's plans for special education needs, and more so um, providing us with a progress report on what has been done in relation to special education needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you.